iPredict works by gathering the knowledge of its 5,000 plus traders. If a stock has a price of 57 cents, that means the market thinks that event has a 57% chance of happening. If you agree, you buy. If you disagree, you short. And if you're right, you make money. Kia ora, good evening New Zealand. This is day 9 until the country goes to the polls. Welcome to iPredict Election 2011, the most accurate source of political and economic information in New Zealand broadcasting. Our 3 predictions tonight. Prediction 1. The iPredict market shows the last 24 hours has forced the National Party vote down to 45%. The Epsom Tea Party tapes have damaged John Key. National are in crisis. How do they pull out of this dive 9 days out from the election? Prediction 2. A Fairfax media poll out today suggests the Epsom Tea Party tapes have failed to throw the Lifeline Act need to return to Parliament, with John Banks a distant second behind Paul Goldsmith. At a 45% probability of happening, is the National Party candidate winning Epsom this week's best buy? Prediction 3. The minor party leaders debate screened on TVNZ last night, and the market predict Greens at 11.5, New Zealand First at 4.7, ACT at 2.5, Mana at 1.9, Māori Party at 1.3, and United Future at 1%. Have the market read this crucial area well? To dissect these predictions, let me introduce tonight's panel. Here's the Labour Party candidate for Mount Albert and was predicted by John Tamahiri on this show on Monday to be the next leader of Labour should Phil fail at the elections, which isn't looking all that likely right now. The affable David Shearer, and he is the political columnist for the National Business Review, moral shepherd of the right, Matthew Hooton. Welcome to you both. We'll also wrap the show with a final prediction, but let's kick things off with tonight's first market prediction. The disastrous manner in which Key has handled the Epsom Tea Party tapes has gone from bad to worse, as police this afternoon carried out search warrants against 4 media outlets searching for the transcripts. Matthew, you have been an advisor to National Party leaders in the past. You know how bad this looked. Key is a far better politician than this, but the idiocy of the strategy to start a war with the news media is now starting to border on the sadomasochistic. What does Stephen Joyce think he's doing?
Well, I think the Tea Party itself was very poorly arranged. I think that they should have made it completely public. I think there should have been some pre-planned public conversation. They would have talked about, I don't know, cleaning up Hobson Bay or better roads for Auckland, and so it was a mistake. And the staff, the political staff, should have removed that object from the table, and so should also have the DPS. I mean, this is the Prime Minister, and you know, it could have been anything. So that said, now National recognised immediately that it had gone badly because of that. So what they did is they began quite a significant research project over the weekend that is still going on. And they found out a lot of things through focus groups throughout the country and from their polling. And what they found is that, particularly after the Murdoch issues in the UK, politicians are obviously despised, we know that, but journalists are more despised than politicians. And on top of that, John Key's not regarded as a politician. And the research showed that the public will always believe John Key over the media. And so that explains the tactics we've seen. They also, the polling showed that 60% of people, or more than 60% of people, thought it was a trivial issue, that the media was being silly, and that there were more important issues like the economy. And the National Party polling showed only 11% of people felt the media should continue to report on the teapot tape issue. So what John Key did, and it was entirely orchestrated. Remember, John Key has emotional intelligence through the roof. He doesn't lose his rag. He knew exactly what he was doing at that press conference. And what he said is, I would like to talk about the economy. And the media said, we want to talk about the teapot. And he said, I want to talk about the economy. And then he walked out. It was entirely arranged. It polled extremely well. And last night's National Party track poll, national support went up. So this is extraordinarily Machiavellian. We've never seen anything. I mean, only Helen Clark is as good as this, right? And they have spun this to National's advantage. And when you think of what a fiasco the event in Newmarket was, it's pretty remarkable. And that's probably why John Key is Prime Minister, and maybe, well, 2 of us never will be.
Right. David, how ineffective an opposition is the Labour Party? For 3 years, you haven't been able to dent John Key once. You've only been given a chance to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat because Key and Banks were arrogant enough to have a conversation in front of the media. Does Labour deserve to benefit from Key's moment of madness?
Well, I think a little bit differently from what Matthew's saying, because on the one hand, you could be right. Some of the because of John Key's inherent popularity, he may in fact be able to carry that for a while, but I don't think he can carry it for too much longer. And I think what he'll start doing is starting to shed the odd 1 or 2% around the edges. And in this game, it's only 1 or 2%. And if you look at it in terms of blocks rather than in terms of parties, then in fact, National is a big loser. Because one, they're likely to lose ACT. I mean, I think this will probably sink Banks. Two, I think there's going to be some grumpy vote that'll transfer itself across onto Winston Peters. This has given Winston Peters a shot in the arm. New oxygen, did really well in the debate last night. Look, he's not everybody's cup of tea. I mean, a whole bunch of media journalists out there don't like him. But I do think that...
well, Phil Goff does, though.
Well, no,
Phil
I mean,
Goff has said he sees Winston as a coalition partner. So,
well, he said he thought that what we should do is let the voters decide on what they should be, what should happen. But I think that
no, but on News Talk ZB, he said he saw him as a coalition partner.
Well, he worked in the last coalition, and he worked as the foreign minister. And actually, to be honest with you, from what I wasn't around, but I heard that he did a reasonably good job as the foreign minister. Certainly in our relationship with Condoleezza Rice and the Americans, he did extremely well. But I think coming back to the point. This is about margins, and yes, it might not be that there's a massive shift, and I don't think that this will necessarily benefit Labour, but it won't benefit National, and I think they'll start to shed the odd percent, and that will be the crux.
You've got to look at the comments that some of the comments that Key has been making, that comparing this recording to the phone hacking of a murdered child, the comment or the defence that, well, if you started publishing parents talking about a suicide, that child might commit suicide, and today's comments that, well, the police, because crime are down, have got time to go and look into this is the glibness that
a few weeks ago everybody would have kind of laughed.
Yeah.
But now I don't think they're laughing. I think it jangles.
I think politically he would have been better just to have shrugged his shoulders and said release. I think that there is a degree of principle on this, for better or for worse. Parliament, under the Labour government and under the previous National governments, has agreed that this offence, taping a conversation without permission, should carry 2 years in jail. That is the law of New Zealand. And I guess the reason for that is we all, I don't know about you, the way I talk when I'm with my mates about politics is
very different.
Somewhat different than when the camera's on.
Agreed.
And I guess...
You use bad words.
I use extreme profanities and I say things that are over the top.
And you think John Key said that as well?
Right, we all do.
Yeah.
We all do.
I mean, I've been
but we're not the Prime Minister of the country.
Okay, but he thought, I think unwisely, that it was a private conversation, and he spoke free and frankly, in a similar way that he does when he's speaking off the cuff to a breakfast or an after-dinner speech. I mean, I understand there was some swearing in an adjectival way that many of us do. I understand that he made a comment about why it is that the Greens get fewer votes in elections than they tend to poll, and that had, he made some disparaging comments about some Green voters.
Certain playing of instruments.
And he talked, as I understand it, that he sort of said, well, he talked about the demographics of the New Zealand First vote. Right?
Older people.
Well, the deranged and bewildered in their 80s, I call them, and that's why New Zealand First doesn't have a long-term future. So that's John Key opposes Don Brash, what John Key regards as Don Brash's extreme right-wing approach, and he thinks that Don Brash is a pretty hopeless politician.
He rolled him at the end of the day.
Yeah, so he made comments like that. Now, he made them in a way which, I mean, all those points are fair enough, but he made them, as I understand, in a way that you wouldn't want to see on a transcript. Right?
David, isn't there a certain amount of staggering hypocrisy here for John Key to pretend to be standing up for the principle of not allowing people to be recorded in secret, when this is the Prime Minister who ran through Parliament under a misuse of urgency, vast new erosions of civil liberties, to allow the police and many other state departments to do that exact thing?
The pork board.
Well,
Yeah, the pork board can now, for Christ's sakes.
yeah. Well, look, I think that the bottom line here is the point that you made earlier, which is effectively that he is making out that this is some sort of a real erosion in our liberties. But in fact, really what it was a political stunt. It was a stunt that he invited media to, and then when the media actually then turned around and recorded it by accident, as it turned out, he's going to say it's a private conversation. Look, it just doesn't wash, and everybody in New Zealand knows that it doesn't wash. And they may prescribe more or less sort of value to that privacy, but I think as time goes on, it just seems like a hole that's getting deeper and deeper. And it has obviously the other side to it, which is all the other issues don't get up.
Sure,
I mean,
sure,
you know,
sure.
It's interesting you say that, because I think one of the losers in this, and this is sad, Labor has tried to run a policy-orientated campaign.
That's right.
I mean, I was at the New Zealand Herald's business
That's right.
breakfast this morning, moved to the boardroom. There's overwhelming support amongst business leaders for Labor's capital gains tax. There's even support for the financial transaction tax.
Yes,
for the
yes,
Party.
yes, yes.
And Labor was trying to run a policy-orientated campaign. Now, for 6 days, we've been talking about this nonsense over whether John Key swore, what he said about the elderly, what he said about Don Brash, and that's unfortunately for Labor crowded Labor out. And I don't think that's
Okay, well,
good for our
hold on. How does this actually play out for the next 9 days? Every single event John Key goes to, the only questions the media will ask is about the tapes. Is Key seriously going to walk out of every press conference up until the election? Is that how he plays it?
Well, I mean, the classic was with Duncan Garner asking the questions, and he said, well, what people are really interested in is the economy. Well, people are really interested in the economy, but they're actually really interested in what's on the tapes. I mean, because the more that you mystify them, the more that people actually want to know. So everybody's just sort of saying, on the right, for God's sake, get them out so we can move on. And on the left saying, just keep it going for a bit longer. Because at the end of the day, you're right, Matthew, but on the other hand, what's actually happening here is that John Key is the centre pole that's holding the whole tent up. And if the pole starts to sort of waver or shrink, then suddenly you've got National Party vote starting to shrink.
No, you're
right. He is the only thing
you
that's
are
holding it
right,
up.
because the other thing that National's private polls have shown in the last few days, so you're right on this, is that John Key's personal popularity has fallen from the high 60s to the mid 60s. And so he has taken a political hit.
How does this play out in 9 days? Does he walk out of every press conference?
because
the
he's
rest
got
of
the
the
poll.
election?
If the media want to play that game and ask him about this tape, he's just going to say, I want to talk about the economy. And the fantastic thing from John Key's point of view is he gets to say, I want to talk about the important issues like the economy, but he doesn't have to. Right? He just says, and then he walks out of the press conference.
But he does look a little bit silly when the same question keeps coming at him.
I think.
Guess what? Frankly, there's nothing on these tapes that's important. I've spoken to people who've heard them, and the fact of the matter is that if there was anything in them that was truly important politically, I know Duncan Garner. He's a friend of mine. He would go to jail over it.
Yeah.
Same with Jonathan Milnes. Same with those guys.
But so why?
The fact of the matter is,
so why did you let it go?
The media have the journalists who've read this have decided, look, there's nothing on these tapes, so it's not worth taking a risk. If there was anything in it, those guys would publish, and they should publish.
But you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Though, is that eventually, at some point, because now we're having these news organisations being searched, which is, I mean, this is it's almost without precedent.
Yes.
I mean, I can't think of a time when people went in to guard against a couple of, if you say, innocuous comments that John Key's made on a tape that's somehow he considers to be so private,
no, it's not about
private that he won't release it. But what's going to happen is that, and this is what happened everywhere else in the world, is somebody's going to leak it internationally, and certainly it's going to be on a blog site somewhere else.
I'm sure that's going to happen.
I'm sure we know it's going to get.
Yeah, I'm sure that will happen.
And
then, ironically, some of the media organisations are going to look a bit silly because it's going to be, well, is that it?
Well, let's have a look at the comments.
possibly.
Okay, question to both of you. At 45% party vote, would you, for National, would you buy because National will get higher than their 2008 vote, or short because the Epsom Tea Party tapes amount to a change in public opinion? What's the call?
Oh, at 45 buy, for sure.
You're going to buy?
45 for buy. National, as I said, is going up in its private polling.
Are you going to buy? Or are you going to short?
No, I wouldn't buy. I'd sit. I think it's getting to where I probably think with the trends and what's going to happen and the amount of movement that you would be able to get in an election, I mean, obviously I hope that it comes down even lower, but I actually think that it's probably realistic.
Could I just ask you one question, David, though, on this, before we move on from this topic? If you do win this election and let's say you become Minister of Justice, will you be repealing that provision in the Crimes Act that provides for 2 years in prison for people who take people in this situation?
I don't know enough about it to comment in detail. I don't have a problem with people's privacy being protected, but I think that the circumstances around this particular event were so orchestrated that in a way it's out by itself. It's not. You cannot in any way sort of make a parallel between this and taping somebody's conversation about their kid perhaps committing suicide. I mean, it's so ludicrous. I don't think anybody in New Zealand would recognise that.
Thank you, panel. Let's move on to prediction 2. The market trading for Epsom in the wake of today's poll showing that despite the Epsom Tea Party gesture, John Banks is still a distant second behind Paul Goldsmith, has seen the market surge to a 48% probability of a National Party win. Matthew, not only has the handling of the Epsom Party tea tapes been damaging to Key, although you suggest that hasn't been the case, it has failed to achieve its intent of saving ACT. At what point do ACT Party voters accept the end is nigh and switch their party vote to the National Party in order to bolster Key's total vote?
Well, I mean, funnily enough, as a result of this being on the news every single night, those of us who are Epsom voters have been reminded now 6 nights in a row that John Key wants us
you are not trying to spin this way.
This is ever so slightly hypocritical, because on the one hand you were saying that the National Party vote is going up, so therefore anyway National Party voters would say, well, we don't have to worry about it, I can actually vote Nationals quite comfortably and safely.
Look, I mean, the poll in the Dominion and I think the press this morning, the Fairfax poll, will be worrying for ACT and also for National.
Yes.
But, you know, I think in the end, none of us really want to vote for Banks, right?
Oh, of course not. He's awful.
But, you know, we will.
Yeah, but this is what you think. This is what you
I've
think.
lived there all my life. I'm telling you.
That's right.
We
maybe you don't understand your neighbours. Is it a gated community you live in? I just
no,
want
it's
to check.
not. We understand.
But you know, I was sitting around a table the other night with the entire table were people from Parnell, and they were all.
I thought you were MP for Mount Albert.
Yeah, well, I just happened to be sitting around a particular table.
You were slumming it.
That's right. They let me out, and they had all voted ACT in the past, and I think out of 8, only 1 was willing to vote ACT again, and because they were just. Politely, they were annoyed with the fact that in a sense their vote was being taken for granted. And so I think there's people are losing a bit of that sort of feeling that they should do what they're told. And I also think if your national voters up there and it looks like it's going to be okay, then they're probably going to say, oh, somebody else.
Question of both of you. Patrick Gower's interview with John Banks on TV3 last night, my God, was devastating and reached fast level after Banks claimed he couldn't remember what he said to Key while Patrick held a transcript of the recording in his hands.
Yeah, it was.
Is this an end to the ACT Party?
Well, one of the things that perhaps John Key and John Banks also talked about in their discussion
that you haven't seen
was of who should be the leader of ACT. And I think the name that is being touted is Catherine Isaac. But the fact of the matter is that ACT can't continue as it is. I mean, it is a joke, right? And those of us in Epsom know that to prevent the Hone-Harawira government, the Phil Goff Hone-Harawira government from being formed, we have to vote for it.
Yes.
But what is absolutely necessary once that happens, obviously Don Brash should go, and Catherine Isaac should come in on the list.
Were you proud of John Banks' performance last night?
He's going to be your local MP.
What we need, I don't like to be, though Epsom is higher socioeconomic, we don't really care who our MP is. We don't need an MP the way they do in Mount Albert. That's the truth of the matter, right? It's not like we don't. Well, we don't have the problems, the social problems.
Don't watch this program.
We don't have the social problems in other parts of the country that MPs are highly paid social.
Actually, I've got to say, I sort of,
we don't really care who our MP is. What we want is John Key to be Prime Minister, and everyone understands the maths.
I think that one of the big things that they underestimated, that ACT underestimated in this in putting John Banks forward, was that actually Rodney Hyde had done a remarkable job. Let's say remarkable job, but a very good job as being a constituent MP. Yeah. And one of the reasons he kept getting the votes back was he had done a lot of. I mean, in fact, I have met Labor voters who voted Labor with their party vote and actually voted for Hyde. Seriously questionable, but I mean, voted for Hyde because he'd done a good job and they thought he'd done a good job.
No, he was, and he was at every school fair. But Banks would be at every school fair. I mean, I do agree that I supported rolling Hyde for Brash. This has not worked out the way I believed it would work out. I mean, it's been a total disaster, and I think had Hyde remained there, he would be more likely to win the seat than Banks. But and I accept also that in the last few days the chances, and the market's saying this, iPredict saying this, the chances of Banks winning used to be overwhelming. Now they're more marginal. But I'm just saying, on the day, we will do the dirty deed.
I think you are being remarkably optimistic.
You're not telling me in Epsom. I mean, the counterfactual is that the people of Epsom are prepared to take a risk that there'll be a Phil Goff, Winston Peters, Green, Hone Harawira, Annette Sykes, John Minto, Sue Bradford government.
Sounds
because
lovely.
That's the only alternative.
Sounds like the dream. Sounds like they're living the dream.
Dream, but
Question to both of you. With the market predicting the National Party candidate to win at 48% probability, would you buy because it's over for ACT, or short because John Banks will storm back?
To buy for, sorry.
Are you gonna buy because you think that National will win, or would you short because you think John Banks will win?
I would probably go short because no, actually,
you'd buy.
Probably buy, I would imagine. Yeah,
right.
I think actually National will win, and I think, I for the reasons I was just saying, I actually think that Epsom voters have just sort of said, okay, enough. We've done this. How many? 2-3 elections now.
Huge numbers overnight on iPredict.
I hold some stock on Banks to win. I've lost money, obviously, as it's fallen the last few days, but I'm not selling, I'm holding.
My God, look at that. That is incredible. Thank you, panel. Moving on to prediction 3. 400,000 tuned into the minor party leaders debate on TVNZ last night, and the market predict Greens at 11.5, New Zealand First at 4.7, ACT at 2.5, Mana at 1.9, Māori Party at 1.3, and United Future at 1%. Have the market read this crucial area? Well, Matthew, most commentators this morning gave the debate to Winston and Hone at 4.7 and 1.9 respectively. Have the market got New Zealand First and Mana right?
Yeah, about right.
Yep.
4.7, 1.9 sounds about right.
Yep.
Hone did do well. You know, he certainly exceeded my expectations when he came on this show. Yep. He's performing well in this election. I think Russell Norman did well in that debate. I think it was a little bit sad seeing the sort of two previous titans of New Zealand politics, Don Brash and Winston Peters, just, you know, they looked like yesterday's men.
The commentators said Winston won.
Well, I don't agree with that.
Even the text messages said they won.
I just feel that the old men, they were very important people over the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, Winston has served in 3 governments, been sacked from all of them, of course, but he's been Foreign Minister, Treasurer. He wants to be Minister of Justice. But I just think that at 68, whatever he is now, it's the end of him, and also for Don Brash. And they're actually similar. I hope they have a beer together and reminisce over old times.
David, after the billboard vandalism issue with the Greens and ACT well behind in Epsom, is 11.5 and 2.5 respectively too high for them?
I think, well, the Greens are notorious for not actually getting up to the mark on election night. I actually think they probably will get pretty close to that this time. I think they actually they've run quite a good campaign. I think Russell Norman's looked respectable. I think they've probably pulled in some of that, you know, sort of more of the right vote that they probably didn't have before. They may have annoyed some of their activists, so some of that might have migrated across to Mana. But I think, I mean, I thought Russell did well last night. Not very sort of inspirational, but given the fact that he was coming off the back of the billboard scandal, I actually thought that he handled himself very well.
He has behaved with the utmost integrity over that billboard scandal, and I think that the way he's handled it has meant that the Greens have not had the scrutiny that they might otherwise have done for what happened there. You know,
it's also helpful that they've got the other thing going on at the same time.
Well, that's right.
Cuppergate is going at the same time.
This was a very serious thing, and actually I think it's more important politically, you know, to the integrity of the election than the teapot thing. I mean, this was planned over many months. It involved dozens, if not hundreds of people.
Hundreds.
It cost some money. And I mean, at the very least, I mean, it was vandalisation of another party's billboards. It was done in secret. There was no authorisation statement on any of those stickers that the Green activists put on those billboards. You know, the Green Party and the political left made a big fuss when 7 members of the Exclusive Brethren published those.
They spent millions, didn't
well,
they?
those weirdos published those brochures, and they had put their names on them,
And
but
you
not their
advised
addresses.
against it. You advised against it at the
but what
time.
I'm saying is, that's what the Brethren did. What the Greens activists have done here is much worse than that.
Much worse.
I mean, you know,
Pithy comments though. It was
well,
funny.
no, I mean, it was. I've got it. In one sense, I admire it. It was professionally done, but it is a serious scandal. And I think the Greens are lucky that they've got a leader like Russell Norman who's managed to spin their way out of it, because this is if this was a group of young nats.
Oh no, completely different.
Who
Would have been
had done- I mean,
completely different.
this is
You're
a
right.
this is
You're
a
right.
serious thing.
Yep.
And I don't.
Yep.
The other
Yep.
thing is,
That's
I
right.
believe Russell Norman. I trust Russell Norman. I think he's an honest person. But I don't. I think others are lying. I don't believe this could be organised over all those months, and not a single Green MP heard about it. Not a single member of the Greens board or governance structure of their party. We're meant to say none of the Green staff in Parliament, except for one, knew about it. I think the Greens are lying.
Question to both of you: which minor party will have the most impact on the post-election government, and why?
Oh, I think probably Winston Peters, just simply because I think he'll be very close. If he gets 4.7 and you have a sort of an overhang, and a few tenths of percent come his way, you might see him flopping over the edge.
The Greens, because the Greens are going to actually decide the next government.
Yep.
The way things are looking, and I know David's still got to get out there and campaign and kiss babies, but the way things are looking, there's 2 governments that are possible. There is a National Act government or a National Green government, and it's going to be the Greens that decide which it is.
The iPredict market predicts Greens at 11.5.
Sorry, you honestly, I mean...
Well, he's pushing this line hard.
I know you're pushing it, but I mean, I cannot imagine the Greens giving confidence and supply to National.
Well, that's fine. Then
Which
there'll be National Act government.
Then
there'll be National Act government, which I prefer.
But I don't think there's going to. Well, I don't think there's going to be an ACT party. So I mean,
I think that.
I mean, what's really interesting about your Johanni Harawira sort of thing is that the other side of it is that what was interesting about the debates last night, that Tariana Turi was very much in a way saying what a good cooperative relationship they had with National, and it was almost looking like they were in a sense getting prepared to move back into that sort of.
Māori Party move back to the Labour Party.
Oh no, John Key will invite the Maori Party into his government and the Greens.
Final word, David, tonight. Your final prediction.
Prediction, I think it's going to be, I think we've got to look at blocks rather than parties, and I think it's anybody's guess where it's going to go now. I mean, maybe a week or two ago I would have thought, okay, it's tracking so solidly, National's vote doesn't seem to be dented at all, but I do think that this is going to make a big change, and we might actually have an election night, something that's much more even in terms of where the blocks are going to line themselves.
Final prediction, Matthew?
Well, I think we're sitting here today with the next Labour Prime Minister, but I don't think we're sitting with the next Labour leader. I think that the mood of the boardroom, 100 CEOs have almost unanimously endorsed David Cunliffe to be the next Labour leader, and you know, I think what's going to happen is that Labour's going to botch its leadership and either choose Cunliffe or Little. I think either of them will fail, and Labour in desperation will turn to David, who is the sort of Labour person that I can imagine National voters voting for.
With that dagger firmly in your back. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, David. To my final prediction, the last 24 hours have seen large amounts of momentum on the markets. Key's Teflon personality and ability to read the New Zealand electorate seem to have been replaced by a poorly structured strategy that will only ratchet up a war with the news media. If we have 9 days of Key walking out on press conferences, I'm shorting the National Party vote even at 45%. Tomorrow night, I'm joined by political strategists Neil Miller and Matt McCartan. Follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook accounts for all my latest election updates. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow, 7 p.m. for iPredict Election 2011, exclusively on Stratus TV. Until then, get trading.